Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots. I'm Katie Halper.
And I'm Mary Mattei. Thanks so much for being here. Our website is usefulidiotspodcast.com. You know, as they say on the airlines, we appreciate you have a choice in who you fly with. And we appreciate your business. Well, I feel the same way about content. Everyone has a podcast now. There's so much content. Thanks so much for being here and choosing us as your content providers. This week on the show, we have two great guests. So we have a doubleheader. We have Barry Eisler, who's a former CIA operative turned spy novelist. We're going to talk to him about his brand new novel, The System, and a whole lot more. And we'll hear from Ben Cohen, the very brave founder of co-founder of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, who has been using his platform to speak out against all forms of injustices, especially Israel's mass murder campaign in Gaza.
And he's also an outspoken activist on so many issues and involved with the Eisenhower Media Network, which is great. So should we start with our 4 basic food groups as usual?
Let's do it. What do we have for Democrat suck?
Let's do it. So, the difference a year and not working for the government can make. People may remember Matt Miller. He got mocked a lot for his smirk. Some people called him Count Smirkula. He was one of the State Department spokespeople under Biden. And he had something really interesting to say during a podcast on Sky News. But I think for it really to land, we have to first watch what he had to say a year ago while he was still a spokesperson for the State Department. Here he is being asked by a reporter about Israel's war crimes.
UN, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, International Criminal Court can all find compelling evidence of war crimes by Israel. And the United States, with its enormous powers of intelligence and direct contact with Israel, can't find those things.
I would say that different organizations have different burdens, different responsibilities, and we take ours very seriously and are taking these assessments very seriously and want to finish them as soon as possible, but it's important that we get them right.
So that was Matt Miller in 2024 speaking to journalist Niall Stanage. Now, fast forward to 2025, let's hear what he has to say about Israel's war crimes, or lack thereof.
I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion. You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government.
Not only would he not have said it, he did not say that. He said that they were not. In other words, what we call that usually is he lied.
I'm really struck that you think now that Israel did commit war crimes, and yet at the time, and I get why, but at the time you were at the podium and you couldn't say that. I mean, personally, that must be very difficult for you.
So the State Department itself had concluded, not in these, they didn't phrase it in these terms, but I think I did at the podium a few times, had concluded that it was likely that Israel had committed war crimes. But I do think it's almost certain that they have.
So there you go. It actually speaks to, I'm kind of torn, Aaron, because on some level, I find it refreshing that he's being so open and honest. But what he's doing in being so open and honest is also being open and honest about how dishonest he was a year ago.
Yeah, he's admitting that he knew Israel was committing war crimes and lied to cover it up. Right. And his excuse is that the government hadn't concluded what he knew to be true. So It's okay to lie about war crimes because your government is still covering them up. That's what he's basically saying. And he's also saying he did it to advance his career, because if he was really speaking from what he knew to be the truth, he would have told the truth and said, yeah, Israel's committing war crimes, and he wouldn't have tried to continue covering them up. But he put his career first. Yeah, he had a job to do. And that's why also his colleague, Vedant Patel, who was also at the State Department, also covering up for Israeli war crimes, he was recently hired by a firm that does lobbying work for Israel. Also awarded for a job well done. So look, I appreciate the honesty. Unfortunately, it just happens to be done in the service of war crimes.
And genocide, right. Yeah, and I wonder if he'll be able to be convicted of any crimes or charged with any crimes, given how he helped cover up war crimes.
Those lies are legalized, so I think he'll be okay. A
girl can dream. Anyway, what do we have for Republican suck?
For Republicans suck, all is not well in the oligarchy. Just recently, Elon Musk departed his brief stint in government service, cutting public sector jobs while ignoring the Pentagon. On good terms with Trump. Remember, Trump gave him like a special key, which he said was for special people. Well, forget all that. These two guys are now in an all-out feud because Elon Musk is not happy with Trump's big, beautiful bill because he doesn't like all the spending in it, apparently. So Elon Musk just dropped this bombshell on his now ex-BFF Trump. Time to drop the really big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT. Wow. So Elon spent $250 million helping to get Trump and the Republicans elected, was side by side with Trump for the first few months of his presidency. Now they get into one little fight, and all of a sudden, Elon Musk is ready to drop the bomb that Trump is in the Epstein files.
Also, why, if that's so bad, was he trying to get him elected?
I mean, great question. Great question. And that's actually a question, Katie, raised by pro-Trump Newsmax. This is how they're handling Elon's bombshell allegation.
Still love Trump, and I really like Elon. This is just a really crappy scenario right now, and I really hope these two can patch these things up, because I think Elon took a low blow by tweeting that, quote, DJT was on the Epstein client list. I mean, something that he knows can't be immediately verified. Also, if Trump was on that island doing something illegal, after all the legal battles that Biden threw at him, if he had done something illegal with Jeffrey Epstein, you would think they would have thrown that at him, no? They pulled out the stops on everything else. The only thing we can point to that was a known association with Epstein was that he was at his club once. And by the way, Trump kicked him out of that club because of reported bad behavior.
Sorry, Newsmax. I hate to question your reporting, but actually, it's way more than just Epstein being at Trump's club once. Trump was on Epstein's plane multiple times. It's in the flight logs. That much we know. So I don't know to what extent Trump is in the Epstein files. But gotta say, whatever the truth is, pretty hilarious that these two are squabbling now after being joined at the hip for the last very, very long while.
It's not inconceivable that he'd be on this list and that Biden wouldn't want to highlight that, because lots of Democrats have been on various lists. And, sexual abuse is one of the very bipartisan phenomena that we have in our culture. So the nice thing is that, Donald Trump was on the flights, but so was Bill Clinton.
Well, for people, hoping that DJT and Elon Musk will patch things up, here's Jesse Waters of Fox News with a reason to hope that this beef can be settled.
These guys are like roommates. They were living in close quarters for like the first 6 months of the year. They're just blowing off steam. The issue is donor maintenance. This guy's the mega donor. So you don't want him accusing you of being a pedophile, and you don't want him calling for your impeachment. I hope he doesn't mean that, but maybe they can patch things up. I mean, Vance called Trump Hitler, and he's on the ticket.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Vance did call Trump Hitler or comparative Hitler. So if they can squash their beef, then maybe there's hope for Elon and Donald.
So that in itself is weird, but I, of course, am assigned Isn't That Weird for this week, so I have to bring my own. And this one is from a podcast and YouTube show hosted by Micah Beckwith, who seriously sounds like just an extremist Christian fundamentalist, but he happens to be actually the lieutenant governor of Indiana. So let's take a listen to what he had to say about evolution, and it's a really interesting theory that he has.
Here's a bigger problem with evolution too. We push this in our schools.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And evolution just says that we're just animals. We're just animals. And in the animal kingdom, the strong survive and the weak die. And I've always wondered why we have our public schools get so upset. Teachers will get upset. There'll be parents who don't believe in God and students that don't believe in God. They get upset when someone commits suicide in schools, right? So a kid will take their life at a school, and the whole school is just wrecked. Yeah. And I stop and I think about that. I'm like, why are they so upset? Because in the theory of evolution, it says if you're not strong enough to make it to tomorrow, you should die. That's what the theory of evolution promotes.
This also could have obviously been an Isn't That Terrible, but it is so bizarre and stupid. So he's actually saying that because of the concept of survival of the fittest, which is not exactly how he's describing it, because of that, if you believe in evolution, then you're supposed to not be upset when someone dies by suicide because they're fulfilling survival of the fittest, which, first of all, they're not, because survival of the fittest means being best suited to the environment. It has nothing to do with strength, if we're really going to get into the evolutionary biology behind it. And sometimes organisms like survive through mutualism, sometimes through competition. But this whole notion of might and best evolved is just eugenicism. But of course, it makes no sense. Even if he was right about that evolutionary theory, like, he actually expects people to not care about people dying. But I feel like there's something in the air, because remember, Jody Ernst was also like, well, if people die, you're going to die. We're all going to die. So I feel like there's this weird emboldened pro-death cult wing of the Republican Party that's emerging.
Yeah, Jody Ernst said that in response to her constituents voicing concerns that cutting Medicare will kill people. And so she said, well, we're all going to die anyway. And then when she was called out for that, as we covered on this week's Monday Morning, she doubled down and basically mocked people who were offended by her comments. But this guy's comment, this lieutenant governor's comment, to me, it just underscores my point that there are many grown adults who really should be revisiting primary education. So the same adults who are attacking, for example, Miss Rachel, a children's entertainer and educator, because she supports the plight of children in Gaza. She doesn't want to see children in Gaza killed. They should be watching Miss Rachel to learn about basic empathy and compassion. And this Indiana lieutenant governor really should be going back to school and learning about evolution and other basic core topics that I just do not think he has a grasp of.
Yeah, I mean, he could probably honestly start with Miss Rachel. I feel like he has to start, like, really ease into it. I don't want to give him anything too challenging. The world of fast fashion has complicated clothing production by shipping cheap parts around the world to whoever can sew them the cheapest. And now you're paying the price with rising costs and tariffs. Back in the 1960s, 95% of clothing Americans bought were made in the USA. Today, it's only 3%. That's why we like American Giant. American Giant is American-made, producing their clothes locally and giving back to the communities that support them. At a time when fast fashion is dominating the fashion space, it's nice to feel good about what we wear. American Giant is about durable, not disposable products. They make clothes built to last. So buying from American Giant is an investment, not just in clothes, but in a community trying to do things the right way. Support American-made, tariff-free clothing with American Giant. Get 20% off your first order when you use promo code USEFUL at american-giant.com. That's 20% off when you use code USEFUL at american-giant.com.
All right. Well, speaking of challenging, for some reason, in the New York City mayor's race, which is really heating up right now with progressive Zohran Mamdani, closing the gap on frontrunner Andrew Cuomo. For some reason, Mamdani is being attacked because he doesn't want to bow down and kiss the feet of a foreign state of Israel. And this is a clip from the recent debate that was held for New York City for the mayoral race on the Democratic side. And watch what happens when the topic becomes, which foreign country would you visit first? And why, Zohran Mamdani, will you not visit Israel?
New York, I would go to Israel.
Mr. Tilson, where would you go?
Yeah, I'd make my 4th trip to Israel, followed by my 5th trip to Ukraine, 2 of our greatest allies fighting on the front lines of the global war on terror.
By the way, this is a side note. Like, I didn't know that Ukraine was on the front lines of the global war on terror.
Yeah, me neither.
That was launched against, supposedly against Al-Qaeda after 9/11. Now, all of a sudden, Ukraine, by fighting Russia, is on the front lines of it. I think he's just mixing up his hegemonic wars right now. I mean, which is understandable. But there's the proxy war in Ukraine is separate from the global war on terror. Last time I checked. Anyway.
Yeah, he's messing up his pro-war talking points.
And for our audio audience, the first speaker was Andrew Cuomo, who just without hesitation said the first country he would visit upon becoming New York City mayor is, of course, Israel. And watch what happens when the question is put to Zohran Mamdani.
Mamdani.
I would stay in New York City. My plans are to address New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs and focus on that.
Mr. Mamdani, can I just jump in? Would you visit Israel? Mayor?
I will be doing, as the mayor, I'll be standing up for Jewish New Yorkers, and I'll be meeting them wherever they are across the 5 boroughs, whether that's in their synagogues and temples or at their homes or at the subway platform, because ultimately
why is it even a question? Like, are you required when you get sworn as mayor of New York City to visit Israel? Is this some sort of constitutional duty as part of the New York City mayor's office? Do you have to visit Israel if you get sworn in? Why is it even a question? But watch what happens next when Mamdani not only says that he won't visit Israel first, but he even dares to say that he believes in equality.
We need to focus on delivering on their concerns.
And just yes or no, do you believe in a Jewish state of Israel?
I believe Israel has the right to exist.
Not as a Jewish state?
As a state with equal rights.
He won't say it has a right to exist as a Jewish state. Be very clear.
And his answer was no, he won't visit Israel.
I said that.
That's what he was trying to say.
No. Unlike you, I answer questions very directly.
All right,
and I want to be very clear. I believe every state should be a state of equal rights.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mamdani.
Look at Andrew Cuomo trying to nail Zoran Mamdani for not saying he would visit Israel first, as if that's somehow like heretic to say.
It's so embarrassing.
And then, of course, it's controversial now that he says, yeah, I believe in a state with equal rights for everybody. I don't believe in a ethno-supremacist state because he's against apartheid. And again, this was deemed so controversial that he was asked about this on a New York morning show.
Because I feel like you did not want to make a definitive statement on this. Do you support Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state?
I support Israel's right to exist as a state with equal rights. I believe that every state...
Why not as a Jewish state?
Because I'm not comfortable supporting any state that has a hierarchy of citizenship on the basis of religion or anything else. I think that in the way that we have in this country, equality should be enshrined in every country in the world. That's my belief.
All right, let's talk...
This is somewhat controversial that he doesn't believe in an apartheid state.
Well, it's also interesting because these people don't realize it, but what they're saying is that being a Jewish state is incompatible with equal rights, which is true, but they don't want to admit that.
Yeah, you're not allowed to be in favor of equality.
Right,
That's somehow controversial in New York City. And it's also controversial that he won't declare that the first thing he's going to do upon being elected is going to visit Israel and pay tribute to a foreign apartheid state.
In some ways, I prefer when people are angry about what he said about Israel being a Jewish state, because being offended by someone's travel plans is just that much more absurd.
Well, I look forward to this controversy continuing to play out in the New York City mayor's race. There's so many issues with New York City. Got to make sure that anybody vying to lead it agrees with the principle that we need to have a foreign ethno-supremacist state that is not premised on equality, and will be visiting it upon his election to the mayor's office.
And Zoran, what he should say is, well, I believe in equal rights. Do you not believe in equal rights? So I'm free. I can help out for free on communications, Zoran, if you're open to it.
And those have been your 4 basic food groups. For this week's interview, we have 2 guests, starting with Barry Eisler. He is a former CIA operative, technology lawyer, startup executive, and now best-selling author, whose brand new spy thriller is called The System. And I spoke to him about his new book and a whole lot more. Barry Eisler, thanks so much for being here on Useful Idiots.
Aaron, it's lovely to meet you. Thanks for having me on the show.
For people who aren't familiar with your eclectic background, tell us about yourself and your new novel, The System.
I spent 3 years in a covert position in the CIA. It was quite an interesting experience. It taught me a lot about the culture and machinations of the U.S. government and what some call the deep state. And it became great fodder for a guy who then went on to become a full-time thriller writer. So the new book, The System, is my 19th novel, and I would say it's my most political yet. They're all political thrillers in one way or another. This one is the most political, and I like to hesitate. I don't want to hesitate to add that it isn't partisan. I think a lot of times when Americans think about politics, they tend to think in partisan terms. I think the partisanship at this point is largely a distraction, and left, right, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. I think these sorts of this sort of prism has become antiquated and fundamentally distorting with regard to an accurate understanding of how power is really exercised in America. And it's that more accurate depiction that I'm going for in The System.
So without giving too much away about your book, talk to us about what the book is about and sort of how it explores the theme of the very compromising positions that our system puts people in.
Yeah, so on a thematic level, I would say it's a reflection of what Nietzsche said about when you gaze long into the abyss gazes back into you. And so my protagonist, Valeria Velez, has just been elected as the youngest woman in Congress. She's going to represent California's 27th district, which incorporates Palmdale. And this is where Air Force Plant 42 is, the site where the Pentagon produces the next generation air dominance program fighters, 6th generation fighter jets. And the first thing that happens with Valeria, who has campaigned on a platform of how we're going to stop stuffing the maw of the military machine and implement a universal basic income and return power to the people, she's immediately handed a dilemma where the Pentagon essentially says, "Oh, you want to play? You want to stop stuffing the maw? We're just going to move the next generation air dominance program from Palmdale to Fort Worth," which they can easily do, and that'll put 5,000 of your constituents out of work. You can imagine the kind of pressures that this puts on a young, ambitious, and idealistic congressperson. She doesn't want to be a one-term congressperson, one-hit wonder, and so the rationalizations begin. And like all good rationalizations, there's an element of truth to these. If she's only a one-term congressperson, she won't be able to get anything done. And in fact, she'll be an object lesson to anyone else who wants to take on real power in America. So how does she navigate this course between getting stuff done within this system by using the system while not being essentially consumed by the system? And that, I think, is a dilemma that anyone who wants to exercise power in America is going to face. Not many people are able to navigate that path successfully.
Do you want to know what I think of when I hear your plot outline? It's the example of Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman.
Yeah.
You know, they did the right thing when it comes to Gaza, right? They signed on early on for a ceasefire, right? As any, I think, decent person should do. But what did that mean for them in real life? It meant that AIPAC spent millions of dollars to get them ousted from Congress. And these two, Congress members who come from Black working class backgrounds can no longer serve their constituents and all the other priorities that they had that had nothing to do with Gaza, where they did the right thing. And so because they did the right thing on this one issue, they were undermined in their ability to do the right thing on all these other issues that they really care about.
Yeah, and it was extremely important to AIPAC for understandable tactical reasons. Morality is separate from what I'm talking about here. But AIPAC wanted to make an example of them. And one of the themes of the book is the notion that power is the perception of power. And anyone who's a fan of Game of Thrones will recognize this too. Power, what did Lord Varys say? Power resides where men believes it resides. And if AIPAC makes an example of one or two Congress people, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing to lose in a primary in U.S. Congress. I think the turnover in Congress, this is in the general election, let alone the primary, it's something like, it's lower than the British House of Lords. I once read that it's lower than in the North Korean Politburo, but I tried to look that up and couldn't find it. It wouldn't surprise me if it's true. I mean, if you have a seat in Congress, it's pretty much a lock. So for AIPAC to be able to turf out to sitting Congress people demonstrates a significant degree of power, and it's a wise investment tactically on AIPAC's part, because next time they won't even have to spend the money. Everyone else would just toe the line, knowing what will be in store for them if they don't.
For anyone, especially people who don't read novels, why should people go out and get it?
Everything I write, all the fiction I write, is intended to be entertaining, and I'll leave it to readers to decide, but the feedback has been pretty good so far. These novels are entertaining. Graham Greene called his books entertainments. And if my novels don't entertain you, then I'm not doing my job right. I should just write a blog post, which I often do. It's not intended to entertain. It's intended only to elucidate. So the novels are definitely entertaining, but I don't think there's a tension between delicious and nutritious. And I always try to put something a lot that's nutritious in my books, whether it's about human nature or politics or the way power is actually exercised, something that will be thought-provoking, something that, if I've done my job well, people will come away with, not with conclusions, but with more questions, more fodder for discussion, open-minded discussion among other people. And hopefully people will read them and in the course of being entertained will come to their own conclusions about the humans and what's really going on in the world. You can find the book on Amazon, the Kindle store. Go to my website, barryeisler.com, that sort of thing.
I know you can't really talk much about your background in the CIA, except to say that you worked in a covert nature. But
I could talk about it. There's not that much. So go ahead, ask me anything.
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, what attracted you in the first place about working at the CIA?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question that gets at the culture of the CIA, and I think what I found there is in some ways a microcosm of tribalism, politics, et cetera, in America. And it's this: what attracted me to the CIA was I was a typically patriotic young guy. I believed America was essentially a force for good in the world. We were the good guys. Our wars were just wars. Our bombs were freedom bombs, that kind of thing. And when I was in college, I got really interested in the world. I realized I just didn't know that much about the world. So I started reading a lot on my own. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Atlantic Monthly, the New Republic, Foreign Affairs, Foreign Policy, the New York Review of Books. I was maniacal. I really devoured these things. And I was learning a lot of facts. But what I wasn't getting was a diversity of viewpoints. I thought, hey, it's the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, et cetera. So I'm getting a lot of different worldviews. But the truth is there's a pretty strong establishmentarian overlap in all the publications that I just named. So I was getting a lot of information, but I wouldn't say any kind of divergent and certainly no dissident points of view. I had a longstanding interest in what I sometimes call forbidden knowledge, which I would loosely define as things that the government wants only a select few individuals to know. So I just had a lot of odd interests. Martial arts. I had a collection of weird books from publishers like Lumpanics Unlimited and Delta Press, Paladin Press. I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of those, but just offbeat stuff. And when I was in college, actually it was law school, I decided, you know what, maybe I'll just apply to the CIA. There's forbidden knowledge there. Plus I can scratch this geopolitical itch I've developed. Went through the process, got the offer, and joined the CIA. And what I would say there's a bit of a misunderstanding, I think, about the political culture in American intelligence, at least as I experienced it. And I should say this is a generation ago. And I was only there for 3 years, and I really didn't do that much. It was mostly training, but because it was a very big bureaucracy, and ultimately that's not a great environment for me. But a lot of people think like, oh, is it a bunch of liberals there, or is it a bunch of conservatives, that kind of thing? What I found is there was some degree of diversity in those more traditional categories in which you might describe people's politics. Probably on the social front, much more liberal than conservative. Again, it's not like I took a big survey, and the CIA is only one piece of the intelligence apparatus, which we're always told is a community. It's a much friendlier word. It's like a neighborhood. I think of it as an intelligence apparatus. I think that's more accurate. But the fundamental, the underlying, and a much more meaningful political culture in a place like the CIA is my politics at that age, where, hey, America is a force for good in the world. And everything we do, whether it's traditional espionage or shading off into coups or even invasions and occupations, that's all just to make the world a better place. If you don't believe that sort of thing, CIA is probably not going to be a good fit for you. I don't know where in the U.S. security apparatus you'd be a good fit. It's much more of a dissident and in some ways even dangerous point of view to take a look at your own country and wonder, are we really the good guys? And for anyone who's watching, if you're curious, there is such a wonderful short video. You can find it by just Googling, "Are we the baddies?" It's hilarious. It's about a couple of Nazis on the Eastern Front. And one of them starts wondering, are we the baddies? And it's funny for a lot of reasons, but it's also telling because it's so hard to take a look at your own tribe and wonder a thing like this. Are we really as good as we're being sold on? So that's the culture I think you'll find at a place like the CIA. I still have friends from those days, I'm glad to say. Our politics are profoundly different. Not, again, on the traditional stuff, like, is it liberal or conservative, whatever. It's that more fundamental thing where they really believe that America is a force for good in the world and that our mistakes are just innocent mistakes rather than something much more nefarious.
It's funny, the way you describe the CIA, I would say is exactly a carbon copy version of the corporate media. I think people in the corporate media feel exactly the same way. They're socially liberal.
Yes.
No one's telling them what to say. No one's saying, see the U.S. as a force for good.
Right.
They just have established that way of thinking by being in the system that they're in. And
yes,
I'm curious your thoughts on this. All the subconscious incentives there are for conformity, whether it's in the CIA or in the media, and how that alone, just without even anyone telling you what to think, just the incentives that are just intuited subconsciously, how that helps keep people in line to, believing in the system that they're serving.
Yeah, that's the really powerful stuff. I remember there's a pretty well-known interview. Noam Chomsky was being interviewed by a British journalist, and Noam Chomsky was telling this guy pretty much what you're just saying. He's like, look, you're part of this system and you reflect the system's views. And the guy's like, no, nobody tells me what to write. And it's almost like he's trying not to laugh. And he's like, you wouldn't have this job if you didn't believe those things. Then you get a sort of chicken and egg problem where the establishment position self-selects for someone who's willing and maybe even eager to conform to the incentive and disincentive structure within that system. And then people just pick up on what they're supposed to say or what they're not supposed to say. Like, I follow a lot of journalists who used to be with The Intercept. It's funny, like it's almost The Intercept ultimately self-selected for some really outstanding journalists by either forcing them out or just making it such a bad place to work that they wound up striking out on their own. But when Glenn Greenwald wanted to publish articles about the Hunter Biden laptop and some what were fundamentally dissident views on Russiagate, the pushback he got there was enormous. But short of that overt pushback, it must have just been in the air, and the culture was just understood. You don't question the fact that the Hunter Biden laptop was some sort of Russian op. And it takes a pretty independent and courageous streak to go up against those sorts of incentives and disincentives. And this, again, is a microcosm of what Valeria Velez is dealing with in the system itself. It's not that any system, or the system, as I like to think of it, is completely inflexible. If you're skilled, if you push hard, you can get some movement. You can get it to do some things that it's not naturally inclined to do. But if you overstep, if you push too hard, you're going to get an increasingly ferocious level of pushback. The early stages of which will be like well-funded primary campaigns. If you call what Israel's doing in Gaza a genocide and you call for a ceasefire, if you say something like the war didn't start on October 7th, it's not like that. You're going to get ferocious pushback, and everybody senses that and pre-censors or modifies their own behavior. It's a little bit like Jeremy Bentham and the Opticon. Like, the beauty of the panopticon is that you don't have to be watching every prisoner all the time. Likewise, in 1984, the telescreen, you never knew when INGSOC, the party, was actually watching you through the telescreen, but they might be. And knowing that they might be, you'll modify your behavior in advance.
Don't get me started on Russiagate. I spent a lot of time on that one, but I would like you, actually, since we're on the topic, I'd like your thoughts on it, just as a propaganda operation. What did you think of Russiagate? I mean, I would argue it was more successful even than the Iraq War, because it enlisted everybody, including, as you mentioned, dissident media outlets like The Intercept.
And to hear the rest of the interview, please go to usefulidiotspodcast.com.
And for the rest of the interview with Barry Eisler, go to usefulidiotspodcast.com. For our second interview, Katie, you spoke to Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's.
Yes, indeed. And it was a fabulous discussion about his activism, his views on Israel, his views on Ukraine, and on a recent arrest. And also, Ben is involved with a wonderful organization called the Eisenhower Media Network, which I encourage everyone to check out. So for a little change in flavor from our first guest to our second guest, here's my interview with Ben Cohen. Welcome, Ben. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, good to be here with you, Katie.
Earlier this month, you and 6 other people were arrested and removed from a congressional hearing where you protested the United States' stance on Israel, and you interrupted the start of Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy's testimony to the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Let's take a look.
Permitted while the committee conducts its business. Capitol Police are asked to remove the individuals from the hearing room.
Move down the hallway.
Ben, why are you getting arrested?
Move down the hallway. If you stop, you will be arrested.
Poor kids in Gaza by buying bombs and pays for it by kicking kids off Medicaid in the U.S.
Keep going down. Keep going down the hallway.
Ben, how many days have they been starving in Gaza?
What has it been? 75 days by now. Stop.
So what made you do that action? And what was the response like? Starting off with the response from the police there. What did they do to you?
Well, what made me do the action, everybody has their breaking point. So, I'm continuing to read about the slaughter of all these innocent children in Gaza. And then I read another article in the paper about another outbreak of lead poisoning in Milwaukee. And it just drives me crazy because, lead poisoning creates irreversible brain damage. There's nothing you can do about it. And we know how to fix it. We know how to prevent it. It's chipping lead paint and lead in plumbing pipes. And we could fix it, for a minuscule percentage, 5% of the Pentagon budget. And so those two things, that we're making a conscious decision to provide the bombs as a gift to Israel that they then use to kill kids in Gaza, and we're kicking kids off Medicaid, and we're not preventing lead poisoning, an easily preventable permanent disease. And so I said, I gotta make my voice heard. I gotta take the most serious action that a citizen can take, which is an act of civil disobedience. So that's what I did.
And you were arrested over this? What happened to you right after you interrupted the hearing?
Yes, I was hauled out of the hearing. I expected that. I was handcuffed. I was marched down this hallway to a paddy wagon. Went for a ride in the paddy wagon. Went to the Capitol Hill police station. Was searched rather intensively, and went through processes, et cetera, and then eventually, I was told to pay $50, and they let me out. It's important, I think, to note that there were a bunch of other people that I was arrested with that were in that that were disrupting that same committee hearing, and what they were focused on was the cutting AIDS funding. That there was this great program, I think, that George Bush put into place to prevent AIDS and to help cure people with AIDS. They were given life-saving medicine, people that are currently dying because that's been cut off. So those other people that were arrested with me, that was their major focus.
Right. And this isn't the first time you've been arrested. Can you talk about your past activism?
Well, the last time I was arrested was protesting in front of the Department of Justice to release Julian Assange. I think just about the most important journalist of our time that revealed illegal things that the government was doing. To me, he's a hero because I wouldn't have known that my government was doing this stuff unless he reported it. And he actually ended up getting released. We won one.
Yeah, that was surprising, right?
Yeah.
I actually feared that he was going to die behind bars.
Yeah. I think that was the direction it was going. I mean, he was in a rotten prison. I mean, he was in London, in what they called the Guantanamo of London.
And was there something that made you interrupt RFK Jr. in particular?
No. As a matter of fact, I had no idea what committee the meeting I was disrupting. I had people that were helping me, and they said, go here. And I was a little surprised to see Bernie sitting across from me, who is the ranking member of that committee.
Did he give you a thumbs up? Did he say hi?
I didn't see any action from Bernie.
Okay.
I was a little focused on other things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it kind of speaks to how the fact that you didn't necessarily know who you were going to interrupt speaks to the way that the government on so many levels and at so many committees prioritizes war and bloodshed over life. Right. So I think it was really great for you to make that connection. But can you talk more about the way that our government prioritizes what it prioritizes?
It's really kind of amazing. It used to be that about 50% of our discretionary budget, that's all the money that's available after the government pays its overhead, 50% of that budget is spent on war and preparations for war. And, when we're not actually fighting a war, we're still spending that amount of money, which is now $1 trillion a year, on preparing to kill millions of mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, sons and daughters, families just like our own. And it's crazy. I mean, I don't think the American people have any desire to kill people just like themselves living in some other country. I mean, the government tries to say that that's how we create peace. I mean, that's bullshit. I mean, that's how we create animosity and more war. I mean, I used to work with Admiral Jack Shanahan, who was saying that we're creating terrorists faster than we can kill them. It's just an absurd mentality. I mean, when you talk to a little kid who's there hitting, you say, use your words. Right. And our government, if they have a problem with some other country, they refuse to talk to them. Before the war in Ukraine, Russia wanted to talk. They made all these overtures to the U.S. because it's really a war between Russia and the U.S. and the U.S. just stonewalled them. No, we're not going to talk. He's saying, look, I'm gathering my troops here. If you don't talk, I'm going to invade. No, I'm not going to talk. And all of this is because of profits, war profiteers, corporations, weapons manufacturers that are making huge, huge profits on killing people. And they're in favor of any time you can use up their stuff. They really like it.
You've been very critical of both Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the way that they claim that they are cutting back on waste and fraud. And as you've mentioned, they, of course, are not doing anything about the Pentagon. Can you speak to this hypocrisy and also to the idea that some people have that Trump is an anti-war president?
Well, I mean, the Pentagon is the biggest spender of any department in the government by, I don't know, probably 10 times bigger than the next biggest department. And it is the biggest waster. I mean, if you go through the GAO reports, the Pentagon is the worst, most corrupt department of any department in the United States, and and Doge and Trump claim that they're trying to root out waste, and they just ignore the biggest source of waste in the government. And on top of that, they give it another $150 billion. Doge was not an effort to eliminate waste. Doge was an effort to eliminate those parts of the government that actually help people, education, AIDS funding, just humanitarian stuff that the country has done that lived up to our values as Americans. And now they're just making it into war. And if you look at the discretionary budget, so for the longest time, it was half the discretionary, but the Pentagon was half the discretionary budget, and that was really excessive. Now we've added the Department of Homeland Security, and of course, Veterans Affairs is also part of the Pentagon budget that's paying for retired and health benefits for veterans. If you put those three things together, combined with how much they've cut everything else, the Pentagon national security budget is 75% of our entire discretionary budget, and everything else, all the things you want, housing, education, healthcare, childcare, Head Start, gets all these skinny little slivers. We're in the process of starting a new campaign called Up in Arms. Nice. It launches on June 12th, and it's a 4-year campaign to make the public aware of these facts. And we start out with talking about nuclear weapons because that's the easiest thing to understand. One nuclear bomb killed over 100,000 people when we dropped it on Hiroshima. And we all said never again.
Right.
Today, the U.S. nuclear arsenal is the equivalent of 50,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs. That is immoral, insane, irrational, and we spend $100 billion a year just on that stuff. And now the government is planning to spend $2 trillion on a whole new generation of nuclear weapons. So that's just an example and indicative of the Pentagon mentality, which is overkill. One weapon is good, 1,000 are better.
Right. Yeah, and of course, Trump describes himself as a fiscal hawk. Not that I think he's, there's deficit trolling is a whole other conversation, but he describes himself as a fiscal hawk. But as you mentioned, he asked for an additional $113 billion for the Department of Defense in his discretionary budget request. And the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I still can't believe it's called that, which of course passed the House, appropriates $37 billion more for defense spending than Trump even requested.
Yeah, and that's the norm. Right. The Pentagon requests a ridiculous amount of money, and then Congress dumps more on it. Yeah. Because we've deindustrialized the country so that the only industrial jobs really are making weapons, and Congress people want the weapons made in their states. Right. But another big part of it is that these weapons contractors are making millions and millions of dollars of so-called political donations, which are really legalized bribery to Congress to just keep the money flowing.
When did you become critical of Israel and its treatment of Palestinians. Was that something gradual? Was your family supportive of Israel growing up?
Absolutely. I'm Jewish by birth. Yes, my family and I were very supportive of Israel. I was born in 51. Not too many years after the end of World War II. And I believed that the Jewish people needed a homeland. Yeah, absolutely supported Israel. And I think I became unsupportive of Israel's policies when I started to learn about how the occupations of Gaza and the West Bank and how Palestinians were being treated. The UN called it an open air prison. So that's when I started to change my views.
Right. Did you face any criticism from friends and family?
Yeah, there's some people that believe that anything Israel does is right. I don't believe that about the U.S. either. I don't believe it about most any country. Countries do some good things and some bad things. I mean, right now Israel is doing a horrible thing.
And you've been very outspoken, and you've also rightly called it a genocide, which, of course, is what most genocide scholars and experts call it. So it's funny that that's considered controversial, even though, again, that is the consensus about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think it matters what you call it. Call it a slaughter, call it murder, call it genocide. I mean, it's killing a whole lot of innocent people, and now it's becoming very clear if you listen to the words of the Israeli leaders that it's about ethnic cleansing and removing an entire population from the place they live and destroying it in the process. I mean, the amount of bombs that have been dropped there is incredible. I mean, it's more than the explosive power of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. It's 500 tons of bombs per square mile. Everything is leveled.
Yeah, it's beyond disturbing. Really, words really do fail. And I think people will look back at what people were doing and saying, and whether they were speaking out and what they were saying, similar to the way that we look back at what people were doing and saying during the Holocaust.
Yeah, I think that's exactly correct. I mean, recently, we celebrated the Jewish holiday of Passover, which is a holiday about how the Jews were oppressed, and they finally escaped. And we celebrate that. But now Israel is the oppressor. So it was a difficult Passover celebration.
Yes, for people who don't have families and friends who all agree with them, I think that was also difficult. But it was. I think. I felt like the only way to celebrate it was to explicitly talk about what was happening, because if not, it's kind of meaningless. Meaningless holiday. Much like I would say, I think that if you don't apply "never again" to what's happening now, I think that becomes a meaningless tribal slogan.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I grew up learning Jewish history, and that made me sympathetic to any people that are oppressed. It made me sympathetic to racial oppression here in the U.S. and the oppression of Palestinians.
Can you talk about the Eisenhower Media Project that you are a part of?
Yep, the Eisenhower Media Network. It's an organization that I co-founded with a veteran Danny Serson. And it's an organization of former military officers that are opposed to endless wars and opposed to this excessive Pentagon budget and constant preparations for war. I don't think it's accurate to ever say we're at peace if we're constantly preparing for war. I mean, I actually think that, that's really economic violence on our own people. I mean, all that money that we waste building weapons that supposedly we hope never to use is money that should be going to our schools, housing at decent prices, childcare, healthcare, you name it. I mean, when it comes to any needs that people actually have in their normal day-to-day lives, what Congress says is, oh, geez, we really feel for you. We care about kids. We care about the schools. Oh, and the housing crisis. Oh, it's horrible. But there just isn't enough money. We wish we could, but we can't. And when it comes to the Pentagon, it's how much more money can we give you to prepare to kill millions of people? What are we telling our kids? I mean, I grew up, I was a gullible kid. I believe that stuff that they taught us about America was about fairness and justice and equality. I mean, what can you tell your kids now? America is about bombing kids in Gaza, providing the bombs. We got problems.
Agreed. Yes. So when did your eyes open to what America was about? Given that you said you were raised as a gullible kid who believed in kind of, I guess, the goodness of America, of the American government.
It's interesting as a little kid. It was during the Cold War, and I had this image in my mind of these two countries, the U.S. and the former Soviet Union, with these huge piles of shiny, brand new weapons facing each other. And behind those big piles of weapons were the people who lived in each of those countries suffering from lack of basic needs: education, housing, healthcare, food. So that was kind of early on, and then I got older. I lived on Long Island. Sometimes my parents would drive the family into New York City, and you come over the bridge, and on one side there was Harlem, an all black area that that was in really bad shape. Buildings falling apart, windows broken, trash all over the place. And on the other side was, this really high-end area of Manhattan, the Upper East Side. And, I just looked at that contrast, and I couldn't accept it. And, I asked my father why that was. He said, well, people in Harlem don't have that much money, and therefore they don't pay much taxes, and therefore the government doesn't provide much services. But, that's what he said. But, I think that really the government needs to provide more services to people that need more services.
Right. And, there's this myth that people in government like to spout, which is that, they can't fund certain things because people need to learn how to balance their budgets just like they do in their personal spending at home. and the governments need to do that too. But, as you've pointed out, the Pentagon has never passed an audit.
Yep, absolutely correct. It's the only department of the federal government that cannot be audited, and it's illegal. There's a law that says that every department must be audited, and this has been going on since the days of Donald Rumsfeld. I can remember testimony that he gave in front of Congress. They're saying, hey, the Pentagon can't be audited. He said, oh, yeah, it's a horrible problem. We'll take care of that in 3 years. I mean, they've been saying that for the last 40 years.
And I wanted to show you a clip because you said that people have decided, when it comes to Hiroshima, never again. I want to show you this very scary clip of Randy Fine, Florida congressman, Republican, also happens to be Jewish and extremely pro-Israel. Here he is talking about Gaza and connecting it to the shooting of the Israeli embassy staffers. And bear in mind, by the way, that the person who did the shooting or who allegedly did the shooting is not Muslim. And you'll see why that's relevant.
The fact of the matter is the Palestinian cause is an evil one.
Yeah, and Congressman, there is a ceasefire deal on the table right now that the White House is hoping both Israel and Hamas will sign on to. Does this shooting change anything when it comes to the course of the war or the negotiations to end it?
Well, I think it speaks to the importance of the only end of the conflict is complete and total surrender by those who support Muslim terror. In World War II, we did not negotiate a surrender with the Nazis. We did not negotiate a surrender with the Japanese. We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated.
We heard in Brooks.
So that's interesting. So the culture that needs to be defeated is apparently pro-Palestine culture, but he's fine with a culture that celebrates nuking people.
That's him.
Well, anything else you want to mention? Thank you so much. You're so busy, so I really appreciate how generous you've been with your time.
Yeah, it's been good talking with you. Thanks for your interest in the issue, and, hope to see you around.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, I really enjoyed that we had 2 scoops on this episode, 2 different interviews, twice as much flavor. Thank you so much to Barry Eisler and to Ben Cohen.
All right, that's the show. UsefulIdiotspodcast.com is our website. Please go there to support us and get bonus content. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to and watching Useful Idiots. For extended episodes, bonus content, and our weekly Thursday Throwdown episode, please subscribe at UsefulIdiotspodcast.com. Support the show for free by subscribing on YouTube, Rumble, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to rate and review. You can also follow us on Twitter at UsefulIdiotPod. Thanks for supporting independent media. We'll see you next time.